The slop bucket was heavier tonight. Ren Callis knew this the way she knew everything about her small, cold life. By the weight of it. By the way her thin arms trembled as she dragged the metal pail across the kitchen floor of Emberfell's great house, the stone slick beneath her worn boots. Potato peels, rotten greens, the cold gray fat scraped off the platters of a feast she would never taste. The smell made her eyes water, but she didn't stop, because stopping was not something an Omega could afford. Not here. Not ever. Watch it! She barely had time to press herself flat against the wall before a beta shouldered past his boots, missing the bucket by an inch. He didn't look at her. They never looked at her. To the wolves of Emberfell, an Omega was furniture. A thing you moved around. A thing that existed only when it was useful and vanished the rest of the time. Ren waited for him to pass. And she breathed. And inside her chest, her wolf small gray, so terribly weak, pressed itself into a corner and stayed quiet. The animal had learned. The hard way. "You're still here." The voice cut through the warm kitchen air like a blade, and Ren's stomach dropped before she even turned. Sabine stood in the doorway, blonde hair coiled and perfect, clothes that had never once known a stain. The head Omega, the one wolf who was supposed to protect the lowest among them, and who instead ruled over them like a queen, with a grudge she could never quite name. "I was just going to empty this," Ren said. "I didn't ask what you were doing." Sabine stepped forward, her heels clicking against the stone. The Alpha family's dining hall is filthy. Grease from the roast splattered on everything. And I will not have the Luna's guests walking into a pigsty. Ren's shoulders sagged. 14 hours. She had been on her feet for 14 hours. Her hands were raw. Her back was a knot of fire. "I'll do it as soon as I—" Sabine's hand shot out. The bucket hit the floor with a clang that echoed off the walls. Rotten vegetables and cold fat exploded across the stone, splattering Ren's boots, the hem of her already ruined dress. "Oops," Sabine said, and she smiled. Kind of smile that had teeth in it. "Looks like you've got another mess to clean first. Better hurry, little one. The Luna doesn't tolerate laziness." She turned. She walked away. Her laughter followed her out like a scent, and Ren stood there, in the spreading pool of filth. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. Her wolf snarled. A small powerless sound, because the animal wanted to fight, wanted teeth and claws and blood, wanted to make Sabine understand just once what every day of this life actually felt like. But Omegas didn't fight. Omegas who fought disappeared. So Ren picked up the mop. 2 hours later, the hall gleamed. Her arms felt like lead. Her knees buckled when she finally stood, and the great house had gone quiet. The Alpha family tucked into their beds on the 3rd floor. The floor with heated stone and soft blankets and windows that looked out over the trees. The betas comfortable in their rooms below. Even the regular pack members curled warm in their dormitories. Everyone had a place. Everyone but her. Ren pulled her coat from its hook by the back door. If you could call it a coat. More holes than cloth now. But it was hers. It was all she had. Because Omegas didn't get new things. Omegas got what was left when everyone else was done. The night hit her like a fist. December in Emberfell was a cruel season. The pack's land sprawled across the northern mountains, where winter came early and stayed long, and the wind carried the promise of a storm rolling down off the peaks. She wrapped the coat tighter, and she started the long walk to the place she slept. The Omega Quarters. That was the generous word for it. The true word was shed. A converted storage building at the very edge of the Pack's land. No heat, no insulation. A roof that wept when it rained, and a single small stove that Wren fed with wood. She gathered herself splinter by splinter through the long, cold months. She had slept there for 6 years. Since she was 16, old enough to work, old enough to be handed off. Before that, there had been the orphanage, and after it, a string of foster homes that passed her along like a coat no one wanted, until Emberfell took her in as a servant and gave her the shed, and called it charity. But it was hers, and it was far from the great house, far from Sabine, far from the wolves who looked through her like she was made of glass. Out here in the dark, Wren could almost pretend she was free. She was halfway across the snow when she heard it. A cry. Faint, thin, almost lost in the howl of the wind through the trees. Wren stopped. She listened, and for a moment there was nothing but the whistle of the storm and the creak of ice-heavy branches. Then it came again. A cry. A real one. High and broken and small. A baby. Her breath caught in her throat. The sound was coming from the forest, from the dark stretch of woods that bordered the Pack's land to the north. And no one went into those woods at night. Not the strong, not the brave. Certainly not an Omega with a weak wolf and a threadbare coat. Because the northern woods were wild, full of rogues, full of things with teeth. The cry came a third time, weaker now, fading, and Wren's feet moved before her mind could catch up. She plunged into the tree line, snow to her knees, the wind biting through her coat like it wasn't even there. Ice stung her cheeks. Her wolf whined, "This is foolish, this is death, this is how Omegas die." But Wren couldn't stop, because the crying was so weak now, so faint, a baby out here alone in the snow. And if she didn't find it, if she didn't reach it in time, there. A bundle of cloth, half buried in a drift beneath a great pine. Wren dropped to her knees. She brushed the snow away with trembling hands. And the cloth, fine, expensive silk that had no business being out here in the dark, fell open. A baby. A tiny, perfect little girl. Dark hair. Skin already turning blue with the cold. No. The word came out of her small and broken. No, no, no. Wren scooped the child up, tucked her against her chest, wrapped her coat, her poor, worthless, hole-ridden coat around them both. The baby wasn't crying anymore. That was the worst part. She wasn't crying, wasn't moving. Her little chest barely rose, barely fell. She was dying, and something in Wren cracked wide open. Her wolf, the weak one, the small one, the one that had spent a lifetime learning to stay quiet, threw itself against the walls of her chest and howled. "Save the pup. Save her. Die before you let her die. Stay with me," Wren whispered. She pressed her cheek to the baby's icy forehead. "Please, please stay with me. You're going to be all right. I promise. I promise." The baby's eyes fluttered open. Gold. Bright, burning gold. Wren had never seen eyes like that. But her wolf knew. Her wolf understood instantly, and it made the animal go still with something close to awe. Alpha blood. Strong alpha blood. This was no ordinary child, and someone had left her here. To die. Wren's mind spun. She needed to get the baby warm, needed the pack doctor, needed help, needed. But first, right now, the child needed heat, needed to survive the next 10 minutes. She rubbed the tiny hands between her own. Fingers like ice. lips gone gray. "Come on," Wren breathed. She brought the little hand up to her mouth, blowing warm air over the frozen fingers. "Come on, little one. Fight. Please. Fight for me." The tiny hand flexed. The little fingers wrapped around Wren's thumb, and the world exploded. Pain. White-hot, searing. It started at her wrist and shot up her arm like lightning striking bone, and Wren screamed. The baby slipped from her grasp into the snow as she doubled over, clutching her wrist. Worse than broken bones. Worse than anything. Something was carving itself into her skin. No, not carving. Burning. Branding. She forced her eyes open through the tears, and she looked down. A mark. Black lines, glowing gold, spreading across the inside of her wrist. Circles inside circles. Symbols she didn't recognize. But her wolf did. Her wolf threw back its head and howled, not the weak sound of before, but something ancient and enormous, and full of a joy Wren had never felt in her entire life. Because that mark, that impossible legendary mark that no living wolf had seen in 100 years. The Alpha King's mate mark. The brand that appeared on the wrist of the one wolf in all the world chosen by fate to stand beside the most powerful alpha alive. On her. On the weakest, most worthless, most invisible Omega in all of Emberfell. The pain vanished, as suddenly as it had come. Wren sat in the snow, shaking her wrist, still humming with heat. And she looked at the baby. The baby looked back at her, those impossible gold eyes. And then the child smiled, and Wren understood with a terrible and perfect clarity that her life had just changed forever. She got the baby back to the shed. She didn't remember how. She got the tiny stove lit, and the child pressed close to the warmth, and she watched color creep back into that little face, watched the gray leave those lips, and she wept the entire time. From cold, from fear, from something else she didn't have a name for. Because in 22 years of life, no one had ever held Wren the way she was now holding this child. No one had ever fought for her. No one had ever refused to walk away. Her own parents had left her at the Pack orphanage the day she presented as an Omega. She'd been 13, old enough to understand exactly what her mother's face had meant when the truth became clear. Shame. They had been ashamed of her, so they had gone. And Wren had spent every year since learning to make herself small, learning to expect nothing, learning the lie so well. She'd almost believed it, that a wolf like her deserved nothing better than the cold and the dark and the slop bucket. But this child, this dying stranger in the snow. Wren had not walked away, and fate had rewritten itself. "I don't know what you are," she whispered to the baby, who blinked up at her, warm now, safe now. "But I think you just saved me." She almost laughed. It came out closer to a sob. "I was supposed to be saving you." The banging on the shed door came just before dawn. Wren's wolf went rigid. Then the door opened without waiting, and cold poured in, and a wolf filled the frame, huge gray, a patrol beta, with eyes that glowed in the dark, and a hand already at his hip. He saw the baby. Something crossed his face. Recognition and fear. "Where did you get that child?" "The woods." Wren held the baby tighter. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "She was buried in the snow. Someone left her there to die." The beta reached for the child, and Wren's wolf snarled, a sound that shocked her as much as it shocked him. Because Omegas didn't snarl at Betas. Omegas didn't refuse. Omegas didn't bare their teeth at wolves 10 times more dominant. But Ren stepped back, and she held the baby to her chest, and she did not look away. "She's cold," Ren said through her teeth. "She needs the doctor, not you." The Beta's eyes went wide, then narrow. "Did you just let her pass?" The new voice was cool and clear and absolute. They both turned. A woman stood behind the Beta in a silk robe worth more than everything Ren had ever owned combined. Tall, elegant, platinum hair and pale eyes that missed nothing. The Luna of Emberfell. Her gaze landed on the baby. Then it moved, slowly, down, to Ren's wrist where the black mark still showed dark against her pale skin. And the Luna went very, very still. She said nothing about it. Not a word. She simply looked back at Ren's face and said, "Bring the child, now." They moved through the great house Ren had cleaned 1,000 times, but never truly seen. Past rooms she'd only ever entered on her knees with a rag. Upstairs she'd scrubbed just yesterday. To a wing she'd never been allowed to approach. The Alpha family's private wing. And there in the hall, wolves gathered in the gray light of dawn. Ren caught fragments of hushed, frightened words as she was ushered forward. "Can't be. The mark is real. Someone got past our... The child has alpha blood. I can smell it from here." A door opened, and Alpha Aldrich Thorne walked into the hall, and Ren's wolf tried to force her to her knees. He was a mountain of a man. 6.5 feet of pure coiled dominance. Black hair shot through with silver. Eyes like molten amber. He radiated authority, the way the sun radiated heat, impossible to ignore, impossible to resist. Ren locked her knees, barely. His eyes found the baby first, then her face, then her wrist. His expression didn't change, but something moved behind his eyes. Shock, disbelief, and under it all, fear. "Show me your wrist," he said quietly. It was not a request. Ren shifted the baby to one arm and held out her hand. The Alpha took her wrist in his enormous fingers, gentle as glass, and traced the edge of the mark without quite touching it. "Impossible," he breathed. And then everything happened very fast. The pack doctor came at a run. He examined the baby with sharp, practiced hands, checking her breathing, her color, her pulse. And when he finally spoke, his voice was grave. "Mild hypothermia. She was close. Another 10 minutes and..." He looked at Ren. "You saved her life." Ren didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. The doctor straightened, and when he spoke again, every wolf in the hall went silent. "Aldrich, this child has alpha blood, strong blood, and unless I'm badly mistaken, she's his," Aldrich said. The doctor met his eyes and nodded once. Ren couldn't stop herself. "Who's..." The three of them looked at her. And then the Luna answered so softly it barely carried. "The Alpha Kings." The words didn't make sense at first, and then they hit her like a collapsing wall. The baby in her arms. The child she'd found dying in the snow. The daughter of the most powerful wolf alive. The Alpha King, who ruled over all the northern packs, the male whose very name made lesser wolves lower their eyes. And someone had left his child in the woods to freeze. That's impossible," Ren whispered. "The Alpha King would never abandon." "He didn't." Aldrich's voice was iron. "Someone took her. Someone got past the king's own guard, stole his daughter, and dumped her in our territory to die." Ren's blood ran cold as she understood. "If the king's daughter had died on our land," the Luna said, and her voice was hard as flint, "he would believe we were responsible. He would come for us. Our pack would be ash within a week. But she didn't die," the doctor said. He looked at Ren, and something like wonder crossed his tired face. "She found her in time. Which means," Aldrich said, "we return her to the king. Now, before this becomes a war." He turned to Ren. His amber eyes swept over her, over the mark over the child, and his expression was unreadable. "And you're coming with us?" "Me." The word came out of her small. "Why me?" He nodded at her wrist. "Because you bear his mark. Because somehow, when that child touched you, fate decided you belong to the Alpha King himself." His jaw tightened. "And when he sees it, there is going to be hell to pay." They drove through the night. Ren sat in the back of a black vehicle worth more than she'd earn in 10 lifetimes, the baby asleep against her chest, the Luna silent beside her, and she watched her whole world disappear behind her in the dark. Everything she owned had fit in one canvas bag. 2 thin dresses, a blanket with more holes than fabric, a chipped mug she'd pulled from the great house's trash 5 years ago. That was it. That was her life. And she'd left it behind without looking back. Because what was there to look back for? The convoy climbed higher into the mountains, and with every mile, Ren's wolf grew more restless, not with fear now, but with something stranger. A pull, a humming under her skin that grew stronger the farther north they went. The mark on her wrist warmed and warmed like it was answering a call she couldn't hear. "You're handling this better than I expected," the Luna said. She didn't look up from the tablet in her lap. Ren didn't know how to answer that, so she said the truth. "I don't have much choice." "No." The Luna's voice was quiet. "You don't." A pause, and then softer, like it cost her something. "But for what it's worth, you did well tonight. Not many wolves would have walked into those woods alone. Fewer still would have saved that child without stopping to think what it might cost them. It was the closest thing to kindness anyone in Emberfell had ever shown her, and Ren felt something warm and unfamiliar unfurl in her chest. The sun was just beginning to rise when they crested the final pass, and Ren saw the king's lands for the first time. She had heard the stories. Every wolf in the north had, but nothing had prepared her. A valley spread out below them like something from an old tale. Dense pine forest on the lower slopes. Open meadows where deer moved through the pale morning light. A dark river cutting through the heart of it all. And rising from the northern end, built into the mountain itself, the King's Hall. It was enormous. Stone and timber, 3 stories tall, with windows that caught the rising sun, and through it, back, in bursts of light. Towers at every corner. Wolves moving along the high walls, keeping their endless watch. "Goddess," Ren breathed. Beside her, even the Luna's voice held something like awe. "I've only been here twice. It's more overwhelming every time." They descended, and the baby stirred against Ren's chest, whimpering softly, and Ren began to rock her without even thinking. "Shh," she murmured. "It's all right, little one. We're almost there." The gold eyes opened, found her face, and for one impossible moment, Ren could have sworn the child knew her. Knew exactly who she was, and what the mark meant, and why the 2 of them had been pulled together out of all the wolves in the world. Then the baby smiled, and grabbed her finger, and the mark pulsed warm. "She likes you," The Luna observed. "I think," Ren said quietly, "she might be the only one who will." Because in her lap slept the daughter of the Alpha King, and on her wrist burned a mark that said she was fated to stand beside him, an Omega who scrubbed floors, who lived in a shed, who owned one chipped mug and 2 ruined dresses. When the king saw her, he would think she was a liar, or a fool, or worse. Fate didn't choose wolves like her, except it seemed this once. They passed through a great gate cut into the valley's stone walls, and the king's guard snapped to attention, tracking every movement with flat, predatory eyes. Inside the king's territory was more than a pack. It was a city, a kingdom, roads, buildings, a great medical hall, a world unto itself. And somewhere in that fortress ahead, the Alpha King was waiting. The hall's doors were twice Ren's height, carved with wolves that hunted and fought and ruled. They swung open without a sound, and she was led through halls hung with tapestries, past a throne of black wood inlaid with silver, empty and yet not empty, because she could feel him, could feel his presence in every stone of this place. Whispers followed her. "That's the Emberfell Alpha. Why would they bring their Omega here, the baby? That's impossible." She was taken 3 days ago. A guard stopped before a set of double doors, carved with a wolf howling at the moon. He knocked twice. "Enter," said a voice from within. And that voice, deep, resonant, carrying so much raw dominance that Ren's knees nearly buckled where she stood. Her wolf threw itself against her ribs, desperate to drop, to bare her throat, to submit. The doors opened. A study, floor-to-ceiling books, a great desk, a fire crackling in the hearth, and standing before it, his back to the door, was the Alpha King. Torrin Ashford was taller than Aldrich by a head. His frame was heavy, with the kind of muscle that came from a lifetime of war. Dark hair cut short, simple clothes. Dark trousers, a gray shirt, and yet the power rolling off him in waves was anything but simple. This was a wolf who could break other alphas without breaking stride. "Alpha Aldrich of Emberfell," Torrin said without turning. His voice was carefully, terribly controlled. "You have something that belongs to me." "Yes, Alpha King." Aldrich's voice was steady. "Your daughter, alive, unharmed." Torrin's shoulders went rigid. "Where did you find her?" "The northern woods on the edge of my territory. Buried in the snow, wrapped in silk. She would have died if—" Torrin turned, and Ren saw the Alpha King's face for the first time. Handsome in a brutal, dangerous way. Sharp cheekbones, a hard jaw, and eyes of that same startling amber gold, the exact color of his daughter's. But it was what lived in those eyes that stopped Ren's breath. Grief, rage, and beneath them both a hunger for vengeance that promised blood to whoever had dared touch his child. That terrible gaze swept over Aldrich, over the Luna, and then it landed on Ren, on the baby in her arms, on the mark dark and undeniable on her exposed wrist. And the Alpha King went absolutely still. The rage in his eyes cracked, and something else broke through shock and disbelief, and for just one heartbeat, something that looked almost like hope, before his whole face shuddered. "You," he said, barely a whisper. "Who are you?" And Ren's wolf finally won. She sank to her knees on the fine rug, cradling the baby against her chest, her head bowed. "Rencallus Alpha King," she managed. "Omega, of Emberfell." Silence. And then he crossed the room in 3 long strides, and dropped to his knees in front of her. His hand shot out and caught her wrist, the one bearing his mark, and the moment his skin touched hers, electricity raced up her arm, and her wolf threw back its head and sang, "Mate. This is our mate." His thumb traced the edge of the mark, reverent disbelieving, and when he spoke his voice was rough and broken open. "How?" Ren dared to lift her eyes to his, and up close she could see it all. The exhaustion carved into his face, the grief lines around his mouth, the weight of a male who had been through a private hell and come out the other side, barely holding himself together. "I found her in the snow," Ren said softly. "She was dying. I tried to warm her, and when she took my hand..." She stopped. There were no words for the rest. "The mark appeared," Torin finished. His eyes searched her face like he was trying to see into her very soul. And then he looked down at his daughter, and his whole expression changed. The king fell away, and something helpless and tender took its place. 3 weeks, he said so quietly. Ren almost missed it. "She's 3 weeks old. Her mother..." His voice caught. "Her mother died, bringing her into the world. And I couldn't even..." He stopped. His jaw worked. "I couldn't even give her a name. Not without I couldn't do it alone." Ren's heart cracked clean down the middle. Because she knew. She knew exactly what it was to have no one in the whole world to hold you up. The baby cooed and reached for her father, tiny fingers grasping. And Torin's face crumpled around a grief so vast, Ren wanted to look away and couldn't. He didn't take his daughter. Ren realized slowly that he was almost afraid to, like touching her would make the loss real all over again. So Ren did something she would never be able to explain. She shifted the baby forward, just slightly, so the little hand could find the king's finger. The gold eyes met the gold eyes, and the baby held on. And the Alpha King of the North, the most powerful wolf alive, the male whose name made mountains tremble, bowed his head over his daughter and wept. Ren said nothing. She only knelt there and held the child and let him, because some grief was too heavy to carry with words. When he finally looked up, his eyes were wet and fierce and fixed on Ren's face. "You saved her," he said. "You risked everything for a child who wasn't yours, for a stranger, and fate marked you as mine." He drew a breath that shook. "I don't understand it. I don't understand any of it. But I know this Ren Callis." His hand tightened on her wrist. Not painful, something else. "No one is going to take you from me now that I've found you. Not the wolves who did this. Not the ones who'll question your rank. Not fate itself." Ren's breath caught. "Alpha King, I don't understand any of this either. I'm no one. I'm just..." "You're not just anything." He said it low, certain, and it landed on her like a hand pressed flat over an old wound. "You're not just anything." No one had ever said that to her before. 22 years. And no one had ever once said that to her. Ren looked down at the baby, at the gold eyes watching her with a trust she hadn't earned and couldn't explain. And she thought of the shed, the cold, the bucket, the lie she'd been taught to believe about her own worth, and something in her quiet and small and gray and stronger than anyone had ever guessed lifted its head. "She should have a name," Ren heard herself say. Torin went still. "Her mother," he said carefully, "wanted to name her Celine. If she was a girl. She never got the..." He couldn't finish it. And Ren looked at the child, at the little face. at those eyes like two small moons. "Celine," she said softly, testing it. "It means moonlight, a light in the dark." The baby cooed and grabbed her thumb and held on. For a long moment, the Alpha King couldn't speak at all, and when he finally did, his voice was wrecked and full of wonder and something that might one day become hope. "Hello, little Celine," he whispered to his daughter. "Your mother would be so proud of you." Then he looked at Ren, and Ren looked at him. And outside the windows, the sun cleared the mountain peaks at last and poured itself gold across the floor of the king's hall, across the king and the Omega and the child who had pulled them both out of the dark. Ren's old life was over. She could feel it. Whatever came next, she could not go back to being invisible. But she had no idea yet how much would still be asked of her. She only knew this. For the first time in her life, she had walked into a room and someone had looked at her, truly looked and seen something worth keeping. And she was not going to let go. Not of him. Not of the child. Not of the small, fierce, impossible thing that had just woken up inside her chest. Whatever came next, she would meet it standing. They gave her a room with a bed. That was the thing Ren kept coming back to, in the strange, dreamlike days that followed. Not the marble. Not the guards at the door. Not the fact that the most powerful wolf in the north had wept in front of her and called her his. A bed, soft enough that she was almost afraid to lie down on it. Warm enough that she woke twice in the night, certain something was wrong, because nothing had ever been this easy on her body before. And beside her room, a nursery, where Celine slept in a crib worth more than everything Ren had owned in her whole life. She should have felt safe. She didn't. Because Ren Callis had learned one thing, and learned it deep in the bone. When life gave you something good, it was only winding up to take it away. She was rocking Celine, lean near the window on the third morning when she heard the voices in the hall. Two of them, low, sharp, one she didn't know, and one she would have known anywhere. Sabine. Ren's whole body went cold, because Sabine was here, in the king's hall. The wolf who had knocked the slop bucket from her hands and laughed. Somehow, she was here. Ren pressed her ear to the door, and her wolf strained to catch the words. "Entirely inappropriate, Alpha King. An Omega in your hall is one thing, but a suite in your private wing-free run of your daughter. It sends the wrong message to every pack in the north." And then his voice, cold as winter iron. "The message I'm sending is very clear. Ren Callis is my fated mate. She has every right to this hall, to that suite, to my child. And anyone who questions it can explain themselves to me. Directly." A pause. "But surely, Alpha, you understand the optics." "What I understand," Torin said, "is that you've been spreading poison about my mate since the moment you arrived. Questioning the mark. Suggesting she conjured it with tricks. Would you like to say those words to my face?" Silence. And then Sabine's voice. Smaller now, but not sorry. Never sorry. "I meant no disrespect. I only worry for... you worry for yourself. Flat. Final. You held power over her in Emberfell. You made her life a misery. I've heard the whole of it. And now she stands above you, and you can't bear it. That isn't, get out of my sight. And if I hear one more whisper against her, you will be barred from this hall and every territory I hold. Are we clear? Footsteps, fast, retreating, and Ren stood on the other side of the door with the baby in her arms. and her heart hammering, and she thought he defended me. He didn't have to, and he did, which was a stranger, more frightening thing than any threat Sabine could make. Because if she let herself believe it, if she let herself lean even a little on the idea that someone might stand between her and the world, and then what? And then she would have that much further to fall. A soft knock. Ren. His voice gentle now. I know you heard. I could hear your heart through the door. She opened it. Taurine filled the frame, still in training clothes, hair damp, and up close. His eyes softened the way they only ever seemed to when he looked at her or the child. I'm sorry you had to hear that, he said. You defended me. Yes. No hesitation. You're my mate. No one disrespects you. Not here. Not anywhere. Ren's chest ached. She's hated me for years. She won't stop because you told her to. Then she'll learn the hard way that I don't make idle threats. His jaw set. But I need something from you, Ren. I need you careful around her. Sabine is ambitious and cruel, a dangerous mix. If she's here making trouble, it isn't only spite. She wants something. What could she possibly want from me? Access. His voice dropped. To you. To Celine. To anything she can use. His amber eyes were hard. Whoever took my daughter had help. Someone inside. And the ones who'd sell a king's child to his enemies rarely announce themselves. They smile. They serve. They wait. Cold slid down Ren's spine. You think Sabine. I think everyone is a question until they're an answer. He exhaled. Which is why I'm giving you a guard. Someone I trust with my life. Because I've trusted her with it. Twice. As if she'd been summoned, a figure appeared at the end of the hall. Tall. Dark-skinned. Hair cropped close to the scalp. She moved like water fluid, certain dangerous, and Ren's wolf recognized the dominance rolling off her at once. A beta, a strong one. Ren Callis, Torin said. Meet Tamsin. The woman stopped a respectful distance away and inclined her head. Ma'am, it's an honor to serve as your guard. Ma'am. No one had ever called Ren that. Not once in her whole life. She didn't know what to do with her face. Thank you, she managed. Tamsin's mouth twitched, almost a smile. You don't have to thank me. It's my job. And my privilege. Her dark eyes were steady. Any wolf chosen by fate to stand beside the king deserves protection. And respect. And Torin looked at Ren over Tamsin's head and said quietly, See, not everyone here questions your worth. Some of us can see exactly how much of it there is. Ren blinked hard, because if she cried, she wouldn't stop. And there was no time for that. There was a war coming. They came the second night. Ren was in the nursery. It was late, long past midnight, and Celine wouldn't settle, so Ren had lifted her out of the crib and carried her to the rocking chair by the window, and she was humming. A lullaby she'd heard other mothers sing years ago from a distance, never once imagining she'd have anyone to sing it to. I never had a family, she told the baby quietly. The gold eyes watched her too, knowing for a face so small. My own parents threw me away like I was nothing. And now here you are. And you look at me like I'm someone. Celine reached up, patted Ren's cheek with one tiny hand. So I'll try, Ren whispered. I'll try so hard. Because you deserve better than what I got. You deserve someone who will fight for you. And I don't know how to be a mother. I don't know how to be any of this. But that I can do. I can love you. And I will never ever let you feel The window exploded inward, glass everywhere. A dark shape came through it in a spray of frost and shards, and Wren moved, threw herself out of the chair, twisting so her body took the fall, and the baby didn't hit the floor, shoulder first with a crack of pain that stole her breath. But she held on. She held on to Celine. The figure landed in a crouch, a male, masked, and in his hand a knife caught the dim light and threw it back. "Give me the child," he said, low, almost bored. "Hand her over, and you get to live." And something in Wren, the small gray wolf, the one that had spent a lifetime learning to lie down, stood up. Her canines lengthened. She felt her own eyes flash. "Get away from us." He lunged. She rolled. The knife hissed through the air where she'd been close enough that she felt the wind of it against her face. "Guards!" she screamed. "Intruder guards!" He came again, and this time she wasn't fast enough. The blade caught her upper arm, tore through cloth and skin, and pain bloomed hot and bright, but she didn't let go. Would not let go, kicked out blind, and felt her heel connect with his knee. He grunted, stumbled, and she scrambled backward toward the door on one arm, blood slicking the floor beneath her. His hand caught her ankle, yanked. She went down again. Celine shrieking against her chest, and he raised the knife. The door blew off its hinges. Torin came through it like something out of an old, dark story. He didn't shift. He didn't need to. His bare hands closed around the intruder's throat and slammed him into the wall, hard enough to crack the stone, and his voice when it came was not a king's voice at all. It was something older, something that lived below language. "You touched my mate." The words dripped. "You raised a blade over my daughter." His grip tightened. The intruder's feet left the floor. "Give me one reason. One. And I'll let you keep breathing long enough to regret it." Behind him, Tamsin poured into the room with 3 more guards' weapons drawn. "Take him," Torin snarled without turning. "And get the doctor. She's bleeding." Only then did he drop the man gasping to the floor. The guards swarmed him, bound his hands, tore off his mask. A young face. Cold eyes. And a mouth twisted into a smile even now. "Who sent you?" Torin demanded. "Who ordered this?" The intruder spat blood and laughed. "You'll never stop us, King." His voice was raw and delighted. "The Hollow Fang is everywhere. In your hall. On your council. Closer than you think. And we will have that child. Because she's the key to everything." Torin's face didn't change, but Wren, half on the floor, felt the whole room drop several degrees. "Get him out of my sight," the king said very softly, "before I forget that I need him alive." They dragged the man out, his mad laughter trailing down the hall. And Torin turned to Wren. And the terrible thing left his face all at once, and what remained underneath was raw and frightened. And he crossed to her and dropped to his knees and gathered her carefully, so carefully, into his arms. "I've got you," he said into her hair. "You're safe. I've got you." "Celine's fine," Wren gasped, "because that was the only thing that mattered. I kept her safe. She's fine." "You did more than that." His voice cracked. He passed the baby gently to Osric, the old pack historian who'd appeared in the ruined doorway. Then he lifted Wren clean off the floor, as though she weighed nothing at all. "You fought off an assassin, with a baby in your arms. He couldn't finish. He just held her. And Wren, bleeding, shaking, exhausted, down to the marrow, pressed her face into his chest and let herself be held. Because for the first time in her life, someone had come when she called. The doctor stitched her arm. She'd been lucky deep, but not dangerous. And afterward in the quiet, Torin sat on the edge of the bed and took her uninjured hand in both of his and told her the truth about the enemy at their gates. The Hollow Fang. An old name. A name Ren had heard once or twice, whispered like a ghost story. A brotherhood of wolves who believed in the old ways, pack alphas ruling without a king, survival of the strongest omegas as property, and nothing more. They had opposed Torin's crown from the day he took it, and for years they'd worked in the dark to tear it down. Bombings, assassinations, poison spread pack to pack. They're terrorists, Torin said, and now they have my daughter's photograph and a word for her the key, which means they were behind the kidnapping. All of it. The snow, the silk, your territory. It was never random. But why leave her to be found? Ren asked. Because they wanted a war. His hand tightened around hers. If she'd died on Emberfell land, I'd have burned that pack to the ground. And in the chaos with the king, mad with grief, the north in flames, they'd have made their move. What move? His amber eyes met hers. A coup, my throne, my death, and someone of theirs, sitting where I sit, dragging us all back 100 years. Ren looked down at the baby, now sleeping in a crib they'd moved into the king's own room, and her arm throbbed, and a slow, cold certainty settled into her. They knew, she said quietly. They knew which room was the nursery. Knew the guard rotation, knew exactly when to come. Yes. Torin's jaw was granite. So the traitor, whoever they are, they're close. Close enough to know the layout of my private wing. He drew a breath. Someone on my council. Maybe even someone who was in the Great Hall today. And their eyes met. And a name hung between them, unspoken, heavy as a stone. But Ren didn't have it yet. Not really. Only a shape. Only a shadow. Because the shadow had begun coming to her in her sleep. She hadn't told anyone. Not even Torin. Because how do you say it? I've been dreaming of a woman. Platinum hair. Eyes like cold water. Standing in a room full of shadows, giving orders to figures I can't quite see. And every night she talks about the Omega who'll ruin everything. About how I have to be dealt with. Before I wake up, she'd told herself it was stress, fear, a tired mind spinning stories in the dark. Until Tamsin came to her 2 days later with a folder in her hands and a look on her face Ren had never seen there before. Concern, and something like awe. "Ma'am," Tamsin said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to sit down." Ren sat. "What do you know about your parents?" The question landed strangely. "Not much. They gave me up when I presented. Left me at the orphanage with a note. Said they couldn't keep a daughter who'd shamed them." She swallowed. Their names were on the record. Betas, both of them. Why, Tamsin opened the folder and laid a single yellow document on the table. "This is your birth record. The original. Not the version filed with Emberfell." Her voice was careful. "Look at the father's line." Ren looked. Father unknown. "I don't understand," she whispered. "The man you called your father isn't on your original birth record," Tamsin said gently. "Which means your mother was involved with someone she couldn't name. Someone whose identity had to be hidden. Someone important enough that a beta woman carrying his child would have been a scandal or a death sentence." Important. How? Tamsin drew out a second page. Older. Fragile. And this one showed a great white wolf on a mountain peak, and beneath it, a name in faded ink. "Have you ever heard of the Silvercrest line?" Ren shook her head numb. Osric can tell it better than I can. But the short of it is this. Before the Alpha Kings, before Tauren's line, before any of it, the Silvercrest ruled the North. For 1,000 years. And they weren't ordinary wolves. They had gifts. Healing that shouldn't have been possible. Dreams that showed them things before they happened. The power to bend other wolves with will alone. Tamsin's dark eyes held hers. And they were declared extinct. 200 years ago. Wiped out in the wars that made the first Alpha King. What does any of that have to do with me? Tamsin laid the last page down. A blood analysis. Numbers Wren couldn't read. And a match circled in red. I had your blood tested. Against samples from Silvercrest relics in the King's own archive. Tamsin's voice was very quiet. It's a match, Wren. You carry their line. You are one of the last living daughters of the Silvercrest. The room tilted. Wren gripped the arms of the chair. Her arms screamed. She barely felt it past the roaring in her ears. That's impossible, she said. I'm an Omega. I'm nobody. I scrub floors. You presented as an Omega, said a new voice. Because that is what happens when royal blood is diluted down through the generations. Osric stood in the doorway, old, bent, eyes sharp as glass behind his spectacles. The Silvercrest were alphas, he said, coming slowly into the room. Powerful ones. But when their line thinned, mixed with betas, with lower wolves hidden away for survival. The children sometimes came out as Omegas. It is not weakness, child. It is camouflage. A way for the bloodline to survive unseen. To wait. He looked at her, and his old face was full of something like sorrow, and something like reverence. You have been hiding your whole life, and you never even knew what you were hiding. Wren could not speak, because she was thinking of the shed. The cold. The years of being told she was worthless, disposable, less than dirt. And all that time. The Hollow Fang knows, Tamsin said grimly. That's why they're hunting you. A living Silvercrest, if she ever woke to her gifts, she could challenge the King's throne. Rally every wolf who still dreams of the old bloodline. But I don't want the throne, Wren said, desperate. I don't want to challenge anyone, Not you, Tamsin said. And she went still, and her eyes moved slowly to the crib by the window. Celine. The name dropped into the room like a stone into deep water. Think about it. Tamsin's voice was barely above a whisper. Celine is the Alpha King's daughter. Tauren's line, the living crown. But the mate mark, it didn't appear only because of fate or love. It appeared because her blood recognized yours, called out to it, across the snow, across the dark. Wren's hand went to her mouth. I'm saying Celine may be the first wolf in 200 years to carry both, the Alpha King's line and the Silvercrests. Tamsin met her eyes. The intruder called her the key. This is why. She's the bridge between the old power and the new. And whoever raises her, whoever shapes her, could hold the whole North in their hands. Wren looked at the sleeping child, sweet Celine, 3 weeks old, who had no idea she'd just become the most dangerous, most precious wolf alive. They'll never stop, Wren whispered. The Hollow Fang, whoever the traitor is, they'll hunt her forever. Yes, Tamsin said simply. They will. That night, Wren couldn't sleep, and the dream came anyway, whether she wanted it or not. The room of shadows, the platinum hair, the pale cold gaze. Except this time, Wren didn't drift at the edge of it. This time she pushed forward, because she understood now what she was seeing. Understood that the small gray wolf inside her had never been small at all, only sleeping, and she pushed, and the shadows thinned, and she saw a cave, torchlight, wolves in dark clothing, and in the center, giving orders in a low, cold, certain voice. The woman turned, and Ren saw her face. She knew it, had seen it just days ago at the council table, where the Alpha had looked at her with a contempt colder than anything Sabine had ever managed. An Alpha of a northern pack blonde and severe, who had stood up in front of every wolf in the hall, and suggested smiling that perhaps the Omega herself was working with the enemy. Vesper Cole. The Omega has awakened, Vesper was saying to the shadows. She's seeing us. I can feel her even now. Her gaze lifted, and impossibly it found Ren across the dream, across the miles, across the dark. There she is. The wolves scattered, and Vesper's hand closed around something at her throat. A talisman, a symbol carved in stone, glowing a sick and sputtering green. And she began to chant, "Ren, get out." Osric's voice somehow from 1,000 miles away. She's using it to track you, but it was too late. Green light lanced across the dream and slammed into her, and pain tore through her skull, and Ren screamed in the dream and in the bed, and she felt herself being pulled 2 directions at once. Torin's hands on her shoulders shaking her awake, and Vesper's dark magic winding around her mind like a chain. You should have stayed hidden, little Omega. Vesper's voice inside her own head now. Should have died, stupid and grateful, in your little shed. But you woke up. So now you have to burn. The green light hunted for the thread that tied her mind to her body. If it found that thread, if it cut it, she would not wake up. No. Ren reached down, past the pain, past the fear, past 22 years of being told to make herself small. And she found it, buried deep in her blood under all those years of hiding. Silver, old, vast, the gift of a line that had ruled the North for 1,000 years, waiting all this time for her to stop being afraid of it. She grabbed it, and she pulled. Silver light exploded out of her in the dream and in the room. Both so bright, Torin threw up an arm against it, and it hit Vesper's dark magic like a tide, slamming a wall, and shattered it. The green light guttered and died. The chain snapped. Vesper reeled backward, her face for one instant stripped of all its ice, showing only shock. And fear. Impossible, she breathed. You're an Omega. You can't. I'm Silvercrest. And Ren's voice in the dream rang with a power that made the cave walls tremble. And you will not touch my family. The silver surged. The dream began to collapse. But before it did, before she was thrown back through the dark into her own screaming body, Ren saw one last thing. A map on the cave wall. A location marked in the northern peaks, and beneath it, in a cold, familiar hand, final phase. 3 days. Then the dream shattered, and Ren's eyes flew open. She was drenched in sweat. Her arm was on fire. Torin was leaning over her, his face gray with terror, his hands gripping her shoulders. Ren! Ren! Can you hear me? I'm here. She was shaking. She could barely get the words out, but she got them out. I saw. Torin. I saw everything. And she told him. The cave. The talisman. The map. The 3 days. And the face. The face at the center of it all. The voice giving the orders, the Alpha who had stood in his own council and smiled while she called Ren a spy. When Ren said the name, Torin went very, very still. "Vesper," he said, barely a whisper. "She's the one," Ren said. "She's the Hollow Fang. She's the voice." For a long moment the king said nothing at all. Then he stood and crossed to the window and looked out over the valley, over the sleeping kingdom, over everything he had spent his life trying to make safe. And Ren watched his shoulders, the set of them changing, the grief and the fear burning away, and something colder and harder settling into their place. "She was in my hall," he said, "at my table, 3 feet from my daughter. Torin, you gave us her name." He turned, and in his amber eyes was a promise so absolute it stole Ren's breath. "You gave us the traitor and the plan and the day. 3 days, Ren. That's what we have. And I am not going to waste a single hour of it." He came back to the bed, sat, took her uninjured hand. "But there's a cost to what you did tonight," he said quietly. "I saw your eyes turn silver. I saw you use it. And I've read the old accounts. Ren the Silver Crest gift was never free. It took from them strength, memory, pieces of themselves." His grip tightened. "So I need you to promise me something." "What?" "That you won't do it again unless there's no other way." His voice roughened. "Because I have already lost one mate. And I will burn this whole world down before I watch it take you too." And Ren looked at him. At this enormous, terrifying, broken open male who had wept over his daughter and defended a nobody. Omega, and now sat holding her hand like it was the only solid thing left in the world. And she thought of the shed, of the bucket, of the lie she'd believed for 22 years. And she thought, I have something to lose now. For the first time in my whole life, I have something worth losing. Which was the most frightening, somewhat wonderful thing that had ever happened to her. "I promise," she said. And she meant it. And somewhere in the northern peaks, in a cave lit by guttering torch and sickly green and alpha, with hair like frost, pressed a hand to her burning temple, and smiled a slow and terrible smile. Because the Omega had woken, just as she'd feared. Which meant there was no more time for patience. Which meant the final phase would begin. Tonight. They didn't get 3 days. They got until nightfall. Because Vesper Cole was many things, but she was not a wolf who waited to be caught. And the moment Ren had found her in the dream, the moment those cold eyes had met hers across the dark, the countdown had changed. The final phase pulled forward, the trap already closing. Torin knew it, the way old soldiers know weather, in his bones. So there was no time to gather the northern packs, no time for careful plans and cautious alliances. There was only a hard ride into the peaks, 30 of his best warriors, and an Omega with a stitched arm and silver waking in her blood. And Ren, who had never held a weapon in her life, stood in the war room and looked at the map. The real one, the one his people had drawn from the pieces she'd given them, and pointed to a spot in the northern mountains. "There," she said. "The cave. I'm sure of it." Because she had seen it, from the inside. Torin's commander leaned over the table, sharp-eyed. "That's unclaimed land, contested ground between 3 borders, no pack, no patrols." She looked up. Smart place to hide, and a hard place to reach. "Then we don't announce ourselves," Torin said. "We go quiet, we go fast, and we end it." And then he said the thing that made the whole room go still. "Ren comes with me." His commander opened her mouth. "She's the only one who can find the door," Torin said, before the objection could form. She's walked those tunnels in her sleep. And his jaw tightened. And I'm not letting her out of my reach. Not now. Not with Vesper hunting her mind. No one argued. But before they left, Ren went to say goodbye to Celine. The child was in the deepest, safest room in the whole hall. 3 feet of stone between her and the world, 6 trusted warriors at the door, old Osric refusing to leave her side. And Ren knelt beside the cradle and pressed her lips to that small, warm forehead. And she whispered a promise. "I'm coming back," she said. "Do you hear me? I am coming back." And Celine, 3 weeks old, who should not have understood a word, reached up and wrapped one tiny hand around Ren's finger and held on, like she believed her. Ren carried that with her into the dark. The ride took hours. The vehicles moved without headlights, wolf eyes in the dashboard glow, climbing higher and higher into country where the snow lay deep and pristine, and no living thing stirred. And Torin's hand found hers in the dark of the back seat. "Stay close to me," he said. "Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is." She managed a shaky smile. "You've said that 4 times. I'll say it 40 more if I have to." And that right there, was the thing Ren kept turning over in her hands like a smooth stone. Because a week ago, she'd been invisible. A week ago, no one on Earth had cared whether she came home. And now this male, this enormous, terrifying king, was afraid to lose her. Was saying stay close like her staying close was the only thing that mattered in all the world. She didn't have words for what that did to her, so she just held his hand and let the mountains swallow them whole. They reached the cave 2 miles out and went the rest on foot. 30 wolves flowing through the trees without a sound. And Ren felt it before she saw it. A wrongness in the air, a taint on the clean cold, like oil spreading across still water. Dark magic. Vesper was here. They slipped in through a crack in the mountain's side, the same one Ren had seen from within, barely wide enough for wolves' single file. The passage plunged down. The air grew thick with earth and stone, and old blood soaked deep into the floor. And Ren's wolf whined, but she pushed forward. Not for herself, for Celine, for Torin. For every wolf who'd ever been told they were nothing. The passage opened into the chamber, and there she was, Vesper Cole, torches painting her in gold and shadow, a ring of hollow-fang wolves around her, and her pale eyes found Ren the instant she stepped from the tunnel. "Well," Vesper said, and she smiled. "The little Omega walked right into my hall. How considerate." Torin stepped forward, putting himself between Ren and the Alpha. "It's finished, Vesper. Your spies are in my cells. Your plan is known. Every wolf who ever whispered your name is being hunted down as we speak." "Is it finished?" Vesper's smile didn't waver. She raised one hand, and the ring of wolves parted, and Ren's stomach dropped. Hostages. 20 of them, maybe more. Bound, gagged, terrified. And she recognized some of them servants from the King's Hall Pack members and goddess children. Children who couldn't have been more than 12. You kill me," Vesper said, conversational, almost bored. "And my wolves open every throat in this room. Starting with the small ones." She tilted her head. "So, shall we discuss terms instead? Like reasonable creatures?" Torin had gone very still, and Ren could feel it through the space between them, the rage hot and enormous, and beneath it, the terrible arithmetic. Because there was no move here that didn't cost lives, no blade fast enough, no plan clever enough. Unless. And Ren felt the silver stir in her blood, felt it answer the dark thing at Vesper's throat. Light against shadow. And she understood with a cold and perfect clarity what she had to do. She stepped out from behind the king. "I have a better offer," Ren said. "Ren, no." Torin reached for her. She slipped past his hand and walked toward Vesper palms open into the space between the torches. "Let the hostages go. Let Torin and his wolves leave, and I'll stay." She lifted her chin. "Oh, that's what you want, isn't it? A silver crest of your own. Royal blood to make your rule real. So take me, and let them go." Vesper studied her eyes narrowing. "Why," she said slowly, "would you do that?" And there it was, the question that cracked the whole thing open. Because Ren looked at this woman, this cold, cruel, ruined alpha, and something in her recognized something in the other. The way you recognize your own reflection in a dark window. And she didn't know how she knew. But she knew. "Because I've watched innocent people suffer my whole life," Ren said quietly. "And I'm done watching. So do we have a deal?" Vesper's smile widened, genuine now, and full of a triumph so old and so bitter it barely looked like joy at all. "We have a deal," she gestured, and her wolves lowered their blades, and the hostages were cut free, ushered stumbling toward the tunnel. Torin's warriors folding around them like a shield. But Torin himself did not move. He stood frozen, staring at Ren with a devastation that broke something loose in her chest. "Go," she told him softly. "Please. Take care of Celine. Tell her." Her voice caught. "Tell her I love her. I am not leaving you." His voice was wrecked. "You have to." And Ren looked at him. And she poured everything she had through the mate bond, not goodbye, not surrender, but a promise, a certainty, the silver building in her blood, like a coming storm. "Trust me, I have a plan." And she watched his eyes change, watched him feel it, the way his whole face shifted from grief to something sharp and terrible and hopeful all at once. "Go," Ren said. "Now." He held her gaze one more heartbeat. Then he nodded. Once. And turned. And led his people out. And the chamber emptied. Until there was only Ren. And Vesper. And the ring of dark wolves. Vesper raised the talisman. The green light woke. "You made this so easy," she said. "Did you truly believe I'd let you live? That I'd share power with you, sweet stupid little Omega?" "No," Ren said quietly. And she stopped fighting the thing in her blood. 22 years she'd held it down. 22 years she'd been afraid of it, afraid of herself, afraid of what she might be if she stopped making herself small. She let go. Silver light erupted out of her like a second sun. It slammed into the green and shattered it. The talisman at Vesper's throat cracked straight down the middle, the sickly light guttering, dying. And Vesper staggered back, her eyes flooding with shock. "Impossible!" "I'm Silver Crest," Ren said, and her voice rang off the stone. "And you were counting on me being afraid." The wolves rushed her, and the silver rose to meet them, but not to kill. Where it touched, they fell. Not dead, only down, unconscious. Overwhelmed by the sheer weight of a thing that had ruled the North for 1,000 years. Vesper shifted. A great pale wolf lunging for Ren's throat. Ren raised a hand, and the silver formed a wall, and Vesper struck it and bounced back, snarling wild. "You can't beat me," the Alpha spat, and there was something desperate in it now. "I've trained for decades. I'm an Alpha. You're afraid," Ren said, and Vesper went still, because it was true, and they both heard it. And that was when it happened. That was when Ren, standing in the silver light with 1,000 years of her ancestors humming in her blood, looked at Vesper. Cole really looked and saw. Not the Alpha, not the monster, not the voice from the dark. She saw the girl underneath, because the silver did more than fight. It knew things. It reached across the space between them, and it showed Ren the truth of the wolf in front of her, and the truth stopped her cold. Vesper Cole had been born an Omega. The realization landed like a blow. Vesper, cruel, cold, ruthless. Vesper had come into the world exactly as Ren had. A thin scrap of a thing with a diluted drop of old blood in her veins. Scrubbing floors, emptying buckets, told every day that she was nothing. Beaten down, overlooked, left in the cold, and she had loved someone once. Ren could see it, a flicker, a ghost, a young wolf with kind eyes. And her pack had torn them apart because an Omega didn't deserve to love. An Omega didn't deserve anything. And Vesper had lost him. And something in her had frozen solid in that loss and never ever thawed. So she had made a choice. She had looked at the world that broke her, and she had decided the world was right. That strength was the only thing that mattered. That the strong ruled and the weak served or died. That the only way to never be hurt again was to become the thing that hurt her. She had become her own tormentors. And Ren stood there, in the silver light, trembling, because she was looking at herself. The same wound, the same cold, the same lie whispered into the same small, aching heart. And two different answers. This is what I could have become, Ren thought, and the thought was ice down her spine. If I hadn't found Celine in the snow, if no one had ever come when I called. This is the wolf I could have been. The silver swelled, and Ren felt her ancestors gather behind her 1,000 years of them reaching through the dark to lend her their strength. And they whispered, "You are worthy. You always were. Not because of your blood, but because of what you do with it. A shield for the weak, a voice for the voiceless, a light in the dark." And Ren embraced it, and she made her choice, because Vesper had chosen vengeance, and it had turned her into stone. Ren chose something else. The silver light wrapped around Vesper's snarling wolf, not to kill, not to destroy, but to bind, to hold, to reach in and strip away the dark, corrupted thing that had been eating her from the inside for years and years. Vesper screamed, a howl of rage, and beneath it, Ren heard it, and it undid her, a howl of grief, the sound of a wound, 2 decades deep, finally cracked open. The pale wolf collapsed, shifted back, human, unconscious, defeated, alive. And Ren stood over her, silver still pouring off her in soft waves, and she said the only thing that felt true. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry no one came for you." Footsteps thundered down the passage. Torin burst into the chamber because of course he had come back. Of course, he had the moment. He was sure the hostages were clear, his warriors behind him, weapons ready. and they took in the scene. The fallen wolves, the broken talisman, Vesper unconscious on the stone, and Ren standing in the center of it all, glowing like something out of the oldest stories. "Ren!" Torin breathed her name. "You did it. You actually—" The silver flickered, and died, and Ren swayed, because Torin had been right. The gift took its price. She felt it draining out of her, felt the exhaustion crash over her like a wave, felt something at the edge of her mind go dim and soft and gone. A memory, an old one from before the shed, from a childhood she could barely remember anyway. Slipping away. Payment rendered. She'd known it might. She'd chosen it anyway. Her knees buckled, and Torin caught her before she hit the ground. "I've got you," he said, gathering her up, his voice thick. "I've got you. You're safe. It's over. You did it." "Tamsin." Ren forced the word out, because she'd seen it in the chaos, her guard going down a hollow fang blade, finding her side, as she'd shielded Ren's blind spot. "She's alive," Torin said quickly, fiercely. "She's hurt, but she's alive. The medics have her. She's going to live, Ren. Do you hear me? She's going to live." And Ren let herself believe it, and let the darkness pull her under. But not before she smiled. Because Celine was safe, and Torin was here, and Tamsin would live. And the wolf who could have been Ren was going to wake up someday to a world that had chosen not to become her. Ren woke to the sound of a child laughing. 2 days later, in the king's own bed, in the king's own room, with sunlight pouring gold across the floor. And Torin in a chair beside her, holding Celine, making impossible faces at her, and the baby shrieking with delight. "You're awake," he said, and the relief in his voice could have filled the whole valley. Celine reached for her, and Ren gathered the warm, wriggling weight of her against her chest, and for a moment she couldn't speak at all. "How long?" she finally managed. 2 days. Torin's hand found hers. "Osric says it's normal. You channeled more than your body was ready for. You lost." He hesitated. "Did you lose anything? Do you remember?" Ren reached into her own mind, and found the soft, dim place where something used to be. She couldn't say what. A face, maybe. A room. Something small from long ago. A little, as she admitted. Something old. I can't even tell you what it was. She looked down at Celine. "It doesn't matter. It was from before, and everything that matters is now." Torin's eyes shone. "You're stronger than any wolf I've ever known." "No." Ren shook her head. "I'm not strong because of the silver Torin. I'm strong because—" and her voice caught, and she had to start again. "Because someone finally came when I called. That's all it ever takes, you know. For anyone. Just one person who comes when you call." And Torin looked at her like she had said the truest thing in the world. Because she had. Vesper Cole was taken into custody, and she would stand trial, and the evidence would bury her, and by every law of the North, the sentence for treason was death. But Ren went to her. Once. Before the trial. She didn't have to. Torin didn't understand why she'd want to. But Ren went down to the cell where the woman who'd tried to kill her sat gray and hollow and stripped of all her ice, and she looked at her through the bars. "I know what you were," Ren said quietly. "I know what they did to you. I know because they did it to me, too." Vesper didn't answer, but her jaw trembled. "I'm not asking you to be sorry," Ren said. "I'm not even asking you to change. I needed you to know. That someone saw it. The girl you were, before all of this. Someone finally saw her, and she watched through the bars as the coldest wolf in the north put her face in her hands and wept like something breaking loose after 20 years frozen. Ren asked Torin later for mercy. Not freedom, the crimes were too great, the dead too many. But mercy, life instead of death. A chance, however small, that a frozen thing might someday thaw. And Torin, king of the north, who had every reason to want her blood, looked at his mate for a long, long moment, and granted it. "Because you asked," he said, "and because you're right, that the measure of us isn't what we do to the wolves who hurt us. It's what we choose not to." The letter came a week later. Alpha Aldrich of Emberfell brought it himself. Along with an apology Ren had never expected for the shed, for the cold, for the years he'd let her suffer under his roof and never once noticed. She forgave him. It was easier than she'd thought. Forgiveness usually was once you stopped believing you were owed the anger. And then he gave her the letter. From her mother. Maren. Ren's hands shook as she opened it. "I don't expect you to forgive me." It began. "I don't deserve it. But I need you to know the truth I've buried for 22 years. You are not the daughter of the man whose name I gave you. Your father was a wolf called Cassian Silvercrest, the last hidden heir of the old royal line. And he was kind, Ren. He was the kindest wolf I ever knew, and I loved him more than my own life. But our love was forbidden. I was a beta. He was royalty in hiding, running from wolves who'd hunted his family to the last. When I carried you, he begged me to run away with him, to leave everything and start again where no one knew our names. I said no. I was a coward. I was afraid of losing my place, my comfort, my safe little life. So he left alone, to find us safe passage, to come back for us. He never came back." Ren's vision blurred. She read on. "They found him. The old brotherhood. The ones who wanted the Silvercrest gone forever. And I have to tell you the worst of it. Because you deserve the truth, all of it, even the part that will make you hate me. They found him because of me. In my fear and my foolishness, I told the wrong wolf where he'd gone. I thought I was protecting myself. I did not understand what I was doing until it was done. And your father died, because of a frightened girl who loved him and betrayed him in the same breath. When you were born, I saw him in your eyes, and I was terrified they would come for you next. So I hid you. I buried your name. And when you presented as an Omega, when the blood hid itself the way it does, I told myself it was mercy, that you'd be safer overlooked than hunted. But that was a lie too. I abandoned you to protect myself from the sight of you, from the guilt, from the memory of the man I loved and failed. I'm sorry, Ren. Your father would have been so proud of you. He would have been so proud. Be everything I was too afraid to let you be." Ren read it 3 times, and she wept for the father she'd never known, who had loved her before he ever saw her face, and died trying to keep his blood alive. And for the mother who had chosen fear over love, and paid for it every single day since. Torin held her while she cried. "She betrayed him," Ren whispered. "She got him killed, and then she threw me away." "Yes. And she wants to see me. She wrote at the end. She wants to meet Celine." Torin was quiet a long moment. "What do you want?" And Ren thought about it. About the shed, about the cold, about 22 years of a wound she hadn't even understood. And she thought about Vesper Cole weeping in her cell. And about the choice, the one that made all the difference, between becoming your wound and choosing something else. I want to say yes, Ren said slowly. Not because she deserves it. She doesn't. But because, her voice steadied, because Selene should know where she comes from, the good and the bad, and because I'm done letting old pain decide who I am. She looked up at him. Everyone deserves the chance to be seen, Torin. Even the ones who failed us. Maybe especially them. And Torin pressed his forehead to hers. This, he said, is why the goddess chose you. And it has nothing to do with your blood. The coronation came a month later. Not white robes, the traditional white of an unmated Luna. Silver. Silver that shimmered like the light Ren carried in her veins. And she walked the length of the great hall with Selene in her arm and Tamsin at her side, walking wounded but whole, refusing to miss it, while every alpha of the North watched from their carved chairs. The same alphas who had sneered at the idea of an Omega Luna, who had questioned, who had doubted. They bowed, every one of them, to their knees on the stone floor, betas and gammas and omegas following, hundreds of wolves, lowering their heads to a woman who 3 months ago had been scrubbing grease off a floor with raw and bleeding hands. Torin placed the silver circlet on her dark hair, and the moment the metal touched her, she felt it, the recognition, the bond-flaring gold, the silver in her blood answering the acknowledgement of a whole kingdom. I name you. Torin said, his voice carrying to the farthest stone, Ren Callis, Silvercrest, Luna of the North, my equal, my partner, voice for the voiceless, shield for the weak, light in the dark. And Ren looked out over the sea of bowed heads and thought of the girl in the shed who had believed she was worth nothing. Look at us now, she told that girl. Look at us now. They stood on the balcony that night, the two of them, the valley spread out below, and the moon full and bright overhead. Selene asleep at last. The kingdom quiet. What happens now? Ren asked. We rebuild. Torin's arms came around her. New laws. Better ones. No wolf in any pack I hold will ever live in a shed with no heat again. No Omega will ever be told they're worth less than dirt. Because I've seen what that lie makes. His voice went quiet. I've seen the wolf it made of Vesper coal. And I've seen the wolf it couldn't break standing right here in my arms. And I want a North full of the second kind. Ren turned in his embrace. I love you, she said. Simply. Because it was simple in the end. I know it's fast. I know we're still learning each other. But I love you, Torin Ashford. And I'm not afraid to say it anymore. I'm not afraid of much of anything anymore. I love you too. His eyes shone. You're my second chance. My proof the goddess doesn't give up on broken things. He cupped her face. Thank you. For saving Selene. For saving me. For choosing mercy when you had every right to choose blood. Where else would I go? Ren smiled through her tears. This is home now. You and Selene and this strange, impossible life. This is where I belong. Forever, Torin agreed, and they kissed under the full moon on the balcony of the king's hall. Two wolves who had found each other against impossible odds. A king who had lost everything and learned to hope again. And an Omega who had discovered she was never weak, only waiting all those cold years for the right moment to finally shine. And in her cradle, Selene slept. Daughter of two bloodlines, bridge between the old and the new. Dreaming perhaps of the world she would one day inherit, a world her chosen mother was already remaking stone by stone into something kinder than the one that had raised her. Because the broken had become whole. Because the forgotten had been remembered. Because the Omega who scrubbed floors had become a queen, not through birth, not through blood, but through the one thing no one had ever been able to take from her: the refusal to let the cold decide who she was. And that was only the beginning.